Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Fireside chat on implementing fair data principles in life sciences. My name is Karin. I'm head of marketing at Ontoforce, and I'm pleased to see so many of you coming to this Fireside chat, and people are still joining, so welcome. I'm here with a bunch of industry leaders, all experts in the area of FAIR. I'll introduce them in a moment to you, and I'll hand it over to the moderator of the day. But first, I have a quick introduction into Ontoforce. So Ontoforce, we are a technology company specialized in data and knowledge management for life sciences companies. We've been around since 2011. We have a product called Discover. Today we have around 10,000 users of Discover. We have offices in Belgium and in the US, and you see some of the leading pharma companies in the world are currently using Discover. As mentioned, it's a data and knowledge platform which is being used by business users, technical users, data scientists to actually get more insights from the data they have, whether it is public data, internal data, third-party data. So it's actually semantic technology which uses a knowledge graph that then links all different types of data to each other, from which then more insights can be retrieved. Discover is used by the customers for one particular use case or for a combination of use cases in the drug development lifecycle. Here you see an overview of actually all of the use cases that we support, or that actually Discover supports pharma companies. We also have NLP capabilities in our Discover platform to really maximize the knowledge hidden within structured and unstructured data. But today we're here for the Fireside chat on FAIR. So we decided to organize this because FAIR is very important for Ontoforce and obviously all of our customers. The FAIR concept has been around since 2016. We're nearly 24. So we wanted to get some voices together from the market and have a chat and understand some views on FAIR and where companies are today with the implementation of FAIR. So we wanted to bring in different voices from the industry together. So, and I'm really proud of all the names and all the people that have agreed to participate in this Fireside chat. So we have someone from the life sciences companies themselves. Tom Plaster is representing the pharma world. Then we have someone representing the voice of the consulting firms, because they also have a lot of experience implementing FAIR or certain views on FAIR, and Aishwarya from Balaji Zifo will do that. Bernice is then obviously representing the technology vendors in this space. And we're really glad that Giovanni Nisato from Pistoia Alliance has agreed to moderate the Fireside chat. Giovanni Nisato, being the project manager for the FAIR implementation group at Pistoia Alliance, I think he dreams about FAIR these days. So I'm quickly going to introduce them so that Giovanni can take over and kick off the roundtable. So Giovanni is leading the FAIR implementation project at the Pistoia Alliance already since 2022, continuing the work that was done in the previous year by the community. He's got 25 years of experience in early stage innovations in international organizations such as Philips. And today he works as a consultant for biopharmaceutical organizations and innovation networks. He's also an affiliate professor at the Grenoble School of Management, focusing on competitive intelligence. So we're very proud that he's here today to moderate this chat. Tom, I think many people here know Tom. He's a senior director in semantic data integration for the oncology strategy at AstraZeneca. His interests and experience are in the application of informatics to critical problems in personal medicine, competitive intelligence, systems biology, biomarker discovery, and drug development along the entire discovery spectrum. And he actually represented AstraZeneca in the IMI Open Facts project, which incubated the FAIR data movement. Tom also co-founded the Pistoia Alliance FAIR data implementation program and the Healthcare and Life Sciences Symposium at the Knowledge Graph Conference. So he's really an expert in the field. Another expert is Aishwarya Balaji from Zifo. She's currently leading the digital services for Zippo in North America. She's in charge of the digital transformation projects, data verification, and lab data automation for R&D, CMC, and clinical areas for various leading biopharmaceutical companies. She's passionate about bringing science, technology, and data together to accelerate drug discovery and development. And then finally, Berenice, my colleague, she's working as a VP Solution Enablement here at Ontoforce, and as such, she's leading many technology implementations of our knowledge discovery platform, Discover. So she's in touch with many pharma companies in their journey to become FAIR. She herself is also a bioinformatician by background, so she's very familiar with the challenges when it comes to data management and other challenges, of course, that the pharma is experiencing. If you have any questions for these industry experts, please use the Q&A box in Zoom, and depending on the time, Giovanni will be able to look at them. Giovanni, happy to hand it over to you now.
Super, thank you very much. Just double checking, can you hear me? Everything okay, sound-wise? Excellent. So thanks so much for the very kind and extensive introduction, Karine, and I'm grateful that Ontoforce is taking the initiative to organize this fireside chat. Just a little bit of context, as most of you know, so the semantic web technologies and the formulation of the FAIR data principles, they've catalyzed a long wave of change in the pharma industry over about 10 years, maybe a bit more than that. In this context, the Pistoia Alliance has been actively promoting and building communities around the practice for FAIR data principle implementation, at least the past 5 years. And actually, Tom was there maybe even before that. Mm-hmm. And in an ecosystem such as we can observe also at Pistoia, there are very clearly different types of players. For example, of course, the users, the pharma industry themselves, but also technology providers and also consultants. And I would argue that the collaborative efforts of all of these players are important if we want to make sure that we have a successful FAIR data implementation. With the vision why we want to do this, to have not just better data management, but really even moving to a data-centric paradigm, which could be a real game changer and a source of innovation in the pharma sector. However, this is very slow change. And while different pharma companies embarked in the journey already years ago, there is still quite a lot of work to do. So today we have a great panel to address this, and they can provide a almost 360 perspective from their vantage point. And I also wanted to thank all of the participants because when the participants to these webinars, not the speakers, but people that are listening, because when you register, you also provided us with some insights and some questions. And I looked at those, and they've been instrumental in shaping a little bit the discussion we're going to have. So I'm going to ask the same questions actually to all of the panelists, and I'm very curious to hear their perspectives. So perhaps starting with you, Berenice, but the question again is going to be the same for the three of you. Okay, FAIR data principles, they're not new, but in your sense, where are we now in the height curve, in your opinion?
Yeah, then it's an easy and difficult question at the same time. If you ask me to point an exact point, we probably are, I think, in the slope and alignment still. The FAIR principles are out for a number of years now, but it took quite a while first to educate the field, right? What does it mean exactly to have a very good understanding about the definition of this principle? I think we saw also, like on the first side, that a lot of people were trying to make it to the letter. That makes the FAIR principle very theoretical and not sufficiently applied. Right, and it also has, I think, slowed down a little bit the adoption. Although I think it's a normal behavior when new principle or new methodology are in place. I think that this last year we have maturated a lot of different, very concrete approaches about how to start with FAIR. even if it's not completely settled for everyone, and there is still a lot to do in that field. I think today where we are the most, we see that we have a lot of POC or pilot. People are starting to embed the FAIR principle in the daily life, but it really needs to be embraced. And I think this cultural change about not only like taking this principle and try to adapt, but really like transform the industry with this FAIR principle from the start and from every decision that you are doing. We are not yet there.
What's your take, Aishwarya, on this?
Yeah, thanks for having me, first of all, and I'm excited to be participating here. One thing I see is that FAIR principles, like Berenice said, have been around. A little bit of quiet down, I would say, in the past year or so. I like to take it as people have started implementing it, finished exploring or trying to understand it, and now they've started somewhat of the implementation process. It's almost like, when you're actually working on it, you're heads down trying to figure it out. The questions are almost, where do I start? What do I work on as the first use case? How do I implement FAIR? And we are seeing pockets of MVPs, use cases, handful of initial successes with respect to implementing the data sets, in certain areas within life science. And really the first 6 months we've been part of certain journeys of FAIR, and it's been quite interesting to see that the initial steps for the FAIR journey are really figuring out what your current state of data is, right? Looking at where all your data exists today, hidden in PowerPoints, Excel sheets, and SharePoint, and calling out, taking it by the letter, right? Are you able to find your data? Yes, I can. I can find my data, but I need to jump through hoops and hurdles to find it. That doesn't satisfy the F in FAIR, right? You need to really have those unique, persistent identifiers. And that's where we're seeing, I think, the first step being taken to really look at IDs as one of the starting points to sort out. And, I feel like people have started figuring it out and working towards it.
So what do you think, Tom? Where are we on the hype curve?
Yeah, thank you, Giovanni, and thanks for Antofors for the opportunity to participate today. So I guess first I want to put a disclaimer so that I can give myself a little cover for being controversial. So these are my views. These aren't necessarily AstraZeneca's views. I worry that we're in the trough of disillusionment. And the reason that I say that is, the paper came out in 2016 with a lot of fanfare around principles, but no implementation patterns. And so we all kind of went off and developed our own implementation patterns. And now we have lots and lots of different ways to do it, but very few common ways to do it. And so I think that's where we need to come together around common ways to do it. So it's not, fair within my department. It's not fair within my R&D organization. It's not fair within my company. It's fair across the industry. And so I think that's, I think what a lot of us who've been doing this for a long time are seeing as one of the challenges. The second part of that is, that not only do we want to come up with better implementation patterns, there's concern around sort of FAIR theater, quote unquote fake FAIR. And so it's really easy for companies to say things like, we're going to be 80% FAIR by 2028. What does that mean? Because FAIR is really for a particular use. Why do we do it? Why do we go through all of that extra effort around data stewardship, curation, cleanup, alignment? It's so that we can solve real problems in biology, real problems in medicine. And so once we start going too far away from the use cases and we start putting out metrics like that, and yes, they're helpful goals, but they're with those things in mind. We're doing them for a purpose. So that's, I think, one of the things that hopefully we can get us through that trough of disillusionment and get us to that point where it really is across industry implementation patterns that we're looking at. I think that's super helpful. And one of the strange side effects of that is we could get to the point where we don't really talk about FAIR anymore. If we're really successful and if we are able to sort of inculcate the data stewardship patterns that we need cross industry, if we're trained in this in the university when we come up, if our partners in the ecosystem, publishers, CROs, are all adopting and moving in this direction, it just becomes something we do all the time. And as much as I enjoy doing webinars like this and talking about all of us getting together, it could just become much more of something we just do routinely.
So the ultimate success will be when we don't need to have this kind of webinars. That point taken. Just
strangely enough.
Just to follow up on the why are we doing it, and maybe actually starting with you, Tom, because you also brought it up. But I don't know if you could share, and again, circling around to everybody the same question from their perspectives. What are the benefits that you can speak to that you've seen in organizations or parts of large organizations that started adopting and implementing fair data principles?
So I think one, I mean, there's a number of them, but I think a couple of them that become top of mind is it really does streamline how you think about data governance, how you think about data quality, how you start building a culture around data itself, a data-centric culture, not just a data-driven culture, data-centric culture, because it really shows you how these patterns can come together across different projects, different groups, to be able to come up with things like common data models, common ontologies, common controlled vocabularies, and really drive toward reuse. And so I think it makes it far less esoteric and far less process-driven, far less people-driven, far less technology-driven. I mean, you're really developing this pattern that makes it so that you get reuse, and you can really take something that's happened in one part of the company or one part of the industry and make it immediately valuable for your own questions. So I think that's very helpful. When we do this, and when you set this up, and we've got 4 or 5 projects at AstraZeneca that already kind of follow the same common approach, you can have one group develop a particular model, develop a particular use case that another group can take in an entirely different direction. And so you can take advantage of the fact that they've gone through the data curation, the data stewardship, the verification to make that possible. And you can even get that to the point where you think about fair data as your foundational layer, data mesh as an architecture that you can use to implement fair data writ large, knowledge graphs as being an example application of what you can do once you've done it. You can get to that point of really empowering deep scientific questions through knowledge graphs, including the emergence of use cases that you didn't plan for. That's really, really powerful. And so it's much quicker, it's much deeper, it's much richer, and you didn't have to design them ahead of time. So everything that we kind of traditionally go through a giant planning process to be able to come up and solve these use cases, if you do this right, they will emerge, and you'll get to see benefits that you didn't plan for.
Thank you for this holistic perspective. Aishwarya, what do you think? What can you share that you've seen people being able to do or better after they started the journey towards fair data principles?
Sure. Yeah, I think in my opinion, it's kind of looking at both the scientific value that the data set produces after you verify it, as well as enterprise value, right? What you can really look at from an enterprise perspective, how you can reuse these data sets and sort of get value out of in an enterprise scale. So some of the ways we're seeing it is definitely applications like knowledge graph, machine learning principles, and algorithms applied on top of these to derive more insights, scientific insights. And specifically in the areas of translational science, cross-domain understanding, when you're applying something on an animal model, you can take your clinical trial data and sort of reapply that on the animal model in ways such as that. If you're able to have access to fair data, it really speeds up the process. And some of the recent quick wins that we have seen with these POCs and smaller initiatives with FAIR, the quick wins that resonate with scientists are really saving time with finding past work, right? And you are definitively cutting down on time that's taken on redoing an experiment because you're able to find past work. That's really a small win, but it's huge. And some context that I want to add is how much FAIR is giving value, right? Like how much FAIR is enough for you to make value from it. That's something that we've seen one example where you cannot really make something that's already collected completely fair, right? There's only so much metadata you can add on to it after the fact. So there is that concept of making sure fair at source is the ideal way. It's obviously not the practical way to approach it, but there's always that balance. And things like, how do you define something like a term of mild, right, that people are entering? You need to go back and ask scientists who really entered it, what did they mean by that when they did the experiment? And what I see as the biggest value that FAIR drives is making all of the data very self-descriptive, right? You don't have to rely on a person to actually describe what they meant when they described it. So that's something that I see as a value that I've heard from some of the customers that we're working with.
And Berenice, you are in the trenches trying to make this happen with different customers. What do you think about this point? What have you seen happening that works?
Yeah, there is benefits that are, let's say, the quick win or very concrete example. For example, you mentioned Aishawa, that there is, for example, the number of experiments that you don't need to repeat, right? Because you redo the experiment because you were not aware that this experiment was done in the past. We had some case where we had about 20% of the experiments, in fact, that proved to just be a reader of the experiment. And time, money, right? But there is also the opportunity to find data in order to take a better decision. We had example, for example, on project where suddenly they realized that there is a clinical study of a competitor that was quite advanced and that was not searchable without a fair framework previously, or even something that has been done in the past in the company. Then this capability to reach out to the right information at the right time, it's very important. There is a benefit that is much broader, and that is broader than the use case per use case. Is like today, most of our department in pharma, in life science industry, are looking to the data that they are used to work on, that they generate, and that's it. And with the FAIR principle, you create also the network to create opportunity to not consider your only data set A, but consider it in a broader perspective. And this is bringing to everyone, to every researcher, the possibility to reconsider the data, to have an explorative way, something that they have never been trained before that. And it's really this FAIR principle at scale that will allow to really offer this exploratory framework for researchers.
I'd just like to follow up on one of the points that Aishwarya mentioned, which is how much fair is fair enough, or including how do we start and stop. So the advice, of course, is that if you can do it fair from birth, it's better. But some people realistically have to make an estimate, how much do I need to retrospectively verify my data. So what do you think? So how much fair is fair enough, or what kind of data could be fair or should be fair or not? Do you have any thoughts on this that you could share? And starting with Aishwarya, but then again, it circles back to Tom and Berenice.
Yeah, I think my perspective is, one, it is use case driven, right? Why you want that data to be fair. Two is thinking about whether you can draw a boundary because this data was already collected. There's only so much you can add onto it, like I said, right? There's metadata that you cannot impute later because you want to make it fair. So that boundary is something that is natural, and I think it'll automatically be evident when we start working on the specific cases. That's how I see how fair is fair kind of a perspective.
Yeah, so I'll pick up on that point. I completely agree with Aishwarya that it should be use case driven, especially with all of the effort needed to curate data and make it fair. So I recall a conversation, early in the days of, Fair Metrics with Michel de Montier, was one of the drivers of Fair Metrics, along with Mark Wilkinson. These are now called Fair Maturity Indicators. And they put together a set of rules for, if your data satisfies these requirements, it's quote unquote fair. And I remember Michelle saying that they were asymptotic. So as you got more and more fair, they'd move the goalpost. We'd make more metrics. And so you could never have data that's completely fair. And that's understandable, because it's fair for what? It's fair for what sort of use cases, you know? And so now I think the main thing that is driving us is, how do we get great value out of artificial intelligence, generative AI? How do we do things like deep learning and graph? What do we have to do with our data ahead of time so we can hit those really cool use cases? So again, this whole idea of fair enough, making so that you hit your use cases, never really over curating, because that's really costly, especially for older data, unless you know there's going to be value with that. I think that's kind of where I come down on fair enough. I would like to say that some of the other ideas around fair play, born fair, you know, these are some ideas that Kees Ben Bakov has done some great work sort of extrapolating on. Really important. So the more that you can make your data, the better that you can anticipate it coming into your system, the better that you're aligned to public standards, the easier this is for everybody.
Berenice, how much
Yeah.
how much fair is fair?
It's not a monolithic landscape, then you probably have very different things. But I think there is today, like there is looking forward, right? All the data that we are generating, that we will be generating, it is making sure that we are providing as much as possible relevant information with a reasonable cost, right? But making sure that what we are producing today will be usable in the future. There is a backward looking about, okay, what do I do with the existing data set? And here I think it should be really value driven. Let's not verify to verify. It should be driven by use case. What do I want to do? What do I need in order to do that? And it's really like putting one block after the other. And of course, verifying this data set, then little by little, you build a larger landscape and you create more opportunity by doing so.
So we spoke about, or you spoke rather, to use cases and why are we doing this. So that speaks to stakeholders that can see a value. And also, we also spoke about, you know, scientists. So there are people that are using, or researchers that are using the data, but also producing it, and they're all part of a set of stakeholders that are involved, including in the transition. And I don't know if you can speak to, maybe starting with Aishwarya, who are the people that need to be engaged in the FAIR journey to increase the chance of success of these kind of projects?
Yeah, I think of it as both top-down governance as well as bottom-up scientific use cases, right, to make it successful. I think top-down governance we've seen has been crucial for adoption, right? Because there has to be a leadership message on why this is important. And of course, that needs to be continued through the journey. And from bottom up, we really want scientists to tell us what kind of value they want to derive from the data, right? The scientific use cases are critical for that. And taking them along in this journey is critical. One of the main thinking is FAIR restricts the data creators from having the flexibility while generating the data. And that thinking needs to change, right? It needs to become, in fact, more that it's helping them a lot more than the current ways of working. And where possible, I think this gives us opportunity to embrace technologies in data capture, where you can really automate the way you are capturing certain data, free up time and give the flexibility to do science faster. So I can recall, I was sitting in front of this research group that was doing a large molecule vaccine research, and we were showing ways in which they could collect metadata in an ELN template. And they just said outright how they had to collect additional metadata, and they said, what is metadata? I'm already collecting enough data, right? So I think we really thought through that, went back, looked at ways they were collecting it today, hidden in Excel sheets, and tried to time how much it takes for them to do that. and then try to reduce the time it takes for them to really create that sort of data input in an ELN or a data capture system, and show them the value that once collected, how you're able to use that sort of data. So I think it's important to keep the scientists in the journey, trying to help them understand the value of why we're doing this.
So, Berenice, you're also, in the business of selling this somehow. So what do you think in terms of stakeholders management and the kind of people that you have to manage along the path?
You need definitively having a message and a project going into this fair journey from top management is very important. But you need also to make sure that you will onboard, of course, data governance, data engineer with you, data strategy, the business also, because if you are just applying that from a technology layer, you will not have the buy-in of the business and of the end user. That will make it something very difficult to roll out. Then you need also at the same time to make sure that you have the different business unit with you in this journey, in this transformation, to push it forward. And up to the end scientists. And for us, also a successful project is not only like creating a project from the perspective of a theory, but bringing the end user that they feel engaged into this kind of project. And as I mentioned during the first question, it's a cultural change, and it means that the entire company need to go through this to embrace this new change. And then it's not only like one or two stakeholders, it's also an effort into changing the mentality of the entire company and making sure that FAIR get into the heart of the decision, the standard processes and decision of the company.
Tom, from your perspective, you're working for a pretty large organization, and culture change is maybe not the easiest, but what are your experiences in terms of the kind of people that make it or break it or make it happen?
Yeah, I think Berenice has really hit the major touch point here around culture. It's when the FAIR data principles came out and when they landed in pharma, I don't think that they were remotely controversial. I think people looked at that and said, yeah, those are all really great ideas. The challenge is, how is this going to affect my day-to-day? How is this going to we're already working with data. We're already pulling it in. We already have our data pipelines. We're already taking all of this data and using it for better decisions within each clinical study, for example, or within a regulatory filing. So if we're asking people to really change their behavior, to really adopt this mantra of FAIR principles and leading toward data centricity, how do you make somebody change from the day-to-day short-term goals into this investment in FAIR data, this investment in how they change their practices? So that doesn't happen unless you have a really good use case or really good sets of use cases and senior leaders who are really going to back it, because it's not a short-term fix. You can't just do it through a proof of concept. It's got to be a multi-year commitment. So within AstraZeneca, we're fortunate to get both of those things. We had a reorganization in R&D in 2019. We created a new therapeutic area, data science and artificial intelligence, led by Jim Weatherall, that really allowed us to galvanize around this idea. We're going to make this serious investment in the cultural change. So that's sort of one piece. Related to that was the idea that we want to get as much information around our clinical studies. I mean, many clinical studies, you have your, in a perfect world, in a world 20 years ago, you have your compound, you find your patient population, you treat it, and you get it to market, and you start selling it, and you move on, right? So it's treated as an independent thing. That's not the reality we live in. More and more today, we need to learn from all of the past clinical studies, how they relate to better understand a larger therapeutic area, particular disease segment. So all of the trials need to learn from each other. They need to be self-reinforcing. And that's not the only touch point. We're also bringing in data from real-world evidence sources. So we do a lot of reverse translational medicine from the RWD sources to better inform our trial design. So we're faced with this challenge now that wasn't the challenge of 10, 15, 20 years ago. The challenge is getting as much out of the data that we possibly can so we can make better decisions where we're going to invest and where we're going to make an impact in health. So that killer use case, along with these sort of structural changes within the organization and this high-level support, I think, are absolutely critical. And a lot of that really kind of rebounds to getting people to change their mindset around the short-termerism, as I call it, where you're thinking sort of your quarter to quarter, what's going to happen next with my project? How do I get this thing over the finish line? Giving enough of a safe space so that people can think longer term, and so that people can really put that investment in early on in better data stewardship, so that you can then start to see some of those wins. And so I think those two things kind of come together. The killer use case and the high level support are really the most important things to make these change.
So it is human nature that it's difficult to, we try to avoid effort. So especially when you're showing people that they have to have effort now and they might reap the benefits 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, it's a challenge. So it's a bit like the, anyway, there are a number of studies, but it's very interesting because some of the technologies involved might not have anything to do with semantic web or knowledge graph. Other things might be the old technologies of how you deal with people. Culture change is an interesting one. So you mentioned, obviously, culture change. It's one of the hurdles. But aside from that, or maybe even more to that, I don't know. Can you speak to some, perhaps the biggest hurdles that you saw or that you're still seeing in the, as Tom was saying, the day-to-day practical transition towards fair data principle implementation? I don't know who wants to start with this, so we can start with you, Tom, since you were speaking already. But
yeah, so thanks for that. So I mentioned sort of short-termerism as being one of the major challenges of making this cultural change. I want to bring up another one, and I want to give full credit to Andrea Splendiani, who just did a really good article on LinkedIn about why data science projects fail. And we can put the link in. I'll ask Antaforce to put that link in. But to unfairly summarize what Andrea was saying, we've got a challenge when we go from a proof of concept in the fair data projects. We can put together these really compelling proof of concepts that can show how the vision can help for very small projects, to really showing the value of that project as we transition from a POC to a proof of value to something that's enterprise-wide. And that frequently what we're doing is we're greatly underestimating the data that's needed as we transition from proof of concept to proof of value, how much curation, how much cleanup is needed as we go from that ideal use case. And so we're underestimating the efforts, we're underestimating the costs, we're underestimating when this comes back to really reap value for the organization. So as I said, we can put that link to Andrea's thoughts. It's far more articulate than what I just laid out here, but I think that's a real challenge. We've had a bunch of really interesting, compelling, small proof of concepts on the way to proof of value. And once they make it to the rest of the company and we start thinking about, all right, well, how much real effort is this? How is this going to change how we think about things short term? When are we going to see the value of that? And so this again gets back to, you know, how do we show value? What are our return on investment calculators? And that was actually a conversation we were having together right before this meeting started. So how are we able to kind of lay out that foundation where we all believe that this shows great value to the organization, where you know, if we invest now, we're going to get these returns. So I think that's something we haven't still nailed as a community. We haven't gotten the answer exactly like we want or as we expect it to be. We just have to be a little bit better about sort of the upfront costs and the value coming out of it. And I know this is something that both Berenice and Aishwarya are probably in the middle of far more than I am right now. So happy to turn it to my colleagues.
Who wants to take it first? Aishwarya or Berenice, whoever.
I can go. Then I think, yeah, the cultural change, we already discussed about it. I think after the challenges could be very different depending on the type of stakeholder, right? Then as mentioned, as Tom mentioned, there is it's a long-term commitment, right? And articulating the value on the long term, it's a very difficult thing to do. In order to make the commitment to this long-term project. Then that is remain one challenge. I think also bringing the user to really apply things, you know, not about the theory about yes, you will find your data more easily, quicker, etc. But it's really like articulating the benefit for the end user, making them converting into that. And most of the time, you know, you also don't want to make FAIR something that the end user need to deal with. It should be embedded into the tool set, into their daily operation. They need to go to some state where the FAIR principles are there. They are driving the efficiency, the new opportunity for the end user, but it's so embedded into it that they don't have the impression to make effort anymore. And I think we are not yet there fully on how we bring this to the end user, to the researcher.
Aishwarya, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and I agree to both Tom and Berenice's points. I think there is one element that I constantly get involved in some of these challenges, technology lock-in, where there's real hurdle in getting data out of some technologies, right? And when you're trying to implement FAIR data, I think there is some of the thinking is some technologies can really check off the boxes and make your data fair, but that's not true, right? You have to really work as your cultural aspect, your people aspect, your data aspect, all of that needs to come together to make it fair. And locking in on technologies when you're designing a fair solution for your organization has been by far the most time consuming to resolve, because when you change one piece of that tech stack, you're relying on that, you're relying on integrations, APIs, lost references, broken links, things like that you really have to fix when something changes. You cannot really, get away with that, but I think we need to keep that in mind when designing these common data models, things that are more agnostic of tech, that are not driven by certain technologies and can stand alone for years to come, right? So that's something that I think we need to think about while designing a fair data solution.
So sorry, go ahead, please.
And the other interesting thing that I noticed is unstructured data, right? So that's been something that is interesting and challenging, but I feel like that's the gold mine, right? There's a lot of unstructured data, and that needs to be really dealt with, and that's one of the challenges. And there are solutions. However, that's something that I find interesting as a hurdle that we need to get through.
It's good. I'm monitoring also the questions that the participants to our webinar are asking, and then if we have enough time, I'll see if I can take a couple from the list. We will not be able to address all of them. And let's say somebody's challenge is also somebody else's business model. So technology locking is there for business reasons. So there are some interesting situations that are baked in this kind of transitions. So from looking and all of you been involved in this for quite a while, and it's been amazing to hear your perspective, also the historic perspective. But now looking forward, what does the future of FAIR look like for you? Or maybe provocatively from my side, do we still need FAIR in the age of large language models, where or some massive applications of certain kinds of machine learning, highly sophisticated machine learning? When the machine can find it for us, do we still need FAIR in your view? And I don't know who wants to start with this. If anyone, otherwise, Berenice.
I can start. And I think LLM definitely a great technology and bringing a lot of opportunity. I think will not resolve everything. And as much as and for me it's a complementary things. More we are able to make the signal in the data clearer with FAIR, better we will have result when we are using LLM. Now technology like AI, LLM are really a very interesting tool set, for example, in order to help to verify or help to query a part of the data. But I think we need to look at the complementarity of the technology. We need to look about the opportunity that it brings. I don't see it as a complete replacement, or I don't think that FAIR is losing completely its value regarding to that. FAIR is helping to make the signal clearer, and LLM will benefit from that.
Aishwarya.
Yeah, the answer is definitely yes, right? You definitely need FAIR in the age of LLMs, because like Berenice said, unless you have FAIR data, I don't see that you can have good use cases for LLM, because LLMs can rephrase what exists, but it cannot create data, right? You cannot make missing research data appear magically. So I feel like you cannot skip that data mindset of FAIR, and I see FAIR as really that data mindset aspect that, you know, like we spoke about all the cultural elements and everything, but LLM as a technology, right? So it's kind of different spectrums. LLM is just like a use case that can be applied on top of FAIR, like knowledge graphs and everything else that we're doing.
So FAIR data is the underlying bedrock foundation. Tom, what do you think?
Exactly that, Giovanni. So I recall one of the very early FAIR data implementation workshops where Eric Little, who's now at Accenture, talked about FAIR data as eating your vegetables. And I think he's still spot on. So it's still that foundational layer where you can't do these other really interesting things around generative AI, around knowledge graphs, if you don't have that layer. This was also a extremely hot topic back in May's Knowledge Graph conference, the relationship, not so much between FAIR and LLMs, but between knowledge graphs and LLMs. And there's lots of complementarity here. There's lots of ways that they can work really well together. The challenge with generative AI and large language models, you know, especially things like, you know, ChatGPT, which, you know, ate the web, is it's only going to be reflective of the sources they were trained on. And so we don't necessarily have great training in biomedical data, especially for things that are inside our firewalls. They're not going to be, you know, in that large language model. So they might be in the knowledge graph, and they should well be in our FAIR data structure. So this is a nice way, as Berenice spoke about, to make the two things complementary. We can use generative AI to, you know, help populate our FAIR data, and if we're managing that with proper ontologies, proper controlled vocabularies, we can limit hallucinations. We also are going to have a much better sense of the provenance of that data, so that the things that are hard in FAIR, the things that are hard in knowledge graph, can be made easier through the use of LLMs. And the things that are problematic about LLMs can get reinforced through FAIR data and through knowledge graphs. So there is a nice synergy there, and I do expect that's going to be one of the real hot topics over the next couple of years, as these technologies mature together.
Yeah, and adding on to that, things like data quality checks, right? That you can automate that with LLMs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you this was, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your response to that. So a high level of complementarity, so LLMs can actually improve on the FAIR data generation, curation, quality checks, and conversely, FAIR data can help machine think a little bit and provide some in some case some semantic layers also to manage hallucination or reduce it or do away with it. And as I understand, LLMs can also help in the creation of some resources that are relevant for FAIR, so ontologies and other things like that. So it's a not one or, but it's both. That's the consensus that I'm hearing here. We have a few minutes before top of the hour, and it's been an absolute pleasure to listen to your perspectives. There are a couple of questions from the audience, and they are at very different levels. So maybe from the very basic level, how do you start the first steps when your organization? How do you start fair implementation when your organization is dealing with Excel sheets?
Yes, then I can perhaps take a start on these questions. And yes, and of course there is a maturity. The maturity is not only on fair, but it's also like a maturity in terms of data governance, data stewardship. But doesn't mean that if you are working with Excel that you should not start your journey with fair, right? Next to the fact that yes, you need to have like the processes, the structure to store your data, make this unique IDs, etc. You can still start with your Excel data, but making sure that you will document, name things properly, cross-reference to different systems. These are very basic things that you can already start to do in your Excel and your Excel work, and that will help you into transitioning into a more consolidated setup. Then I think also one of the advice that I would say, we hear sometimes like organization like, we don't have we don't have sufficient data to go into this problem, or we have Excel file. Like, yeah, and more you wait, bigger the problem will be, or less opportunity or you will have, or more challenges you will have. And I think that even with Excel, start to do your best to try to make sure that you are referencing your data very well, making sure that these Excel files become available, that you foresee a system where they can be ingested and making them searchable, etc. Then doesn't matter how you start. I think the earlier you start, better you will end up, or quicker you will go into a state where you will value the return.
There are a couple of questions that I'm sure you will be able to address, but maybe we don't have the time, but also include on what Berenice was saying. How do you start creating those unique identifiers? How do you implement that? How do you so I think there's also an appetite for, well, okay, we want to do this, but how do we do it in practice? So there are some maybe some high-level guidance that I can point all the people that are participating. So if you look on the Pistoia Alliance website, we have a thing called Fair Toolkit. There are other resources like Fair Plus's cookbook, and there are at least some indications on how to get started on the journey. So I'll see with Anton Forster, maybe we can share some of them afterwards. And there's a kind of a maybe at the end, so starting with F, findable and uniquely identified objects, even with maybe non-structured or not very structured data, including Excel sheets. So the message is you should start wherever you are and try not to make it worse. But maybe looking further ahead on the interoperability, maybe reusability. So this is a question that was actually asked for Berenice or Speyer, but actually maybe even Tom can comment on that, and about how fair needs to be across companies, and how do we do this? How do we have interoperability across companies, or reusability across companies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this has been a big concern about the fair implementation team within Pistoia for a long time. We don't want an implementation pattern that's just going to be for us. We want it to be cross-industry. We want to reduce the friction for data coming in, whether it's coming from CROs or publishers or whomever. And so there's a project that Giovanni's leading called the Pharma General Ontology that's started this year, where we're basically trying to come up with a common data model, a mid-level ontology as an integration point across our companies. So we're contributing to it. Roche, GSK, Pfizer, BMS, many others are contributing to this, kind of giving their high-level common data models. And then we're going to come up with some loose coupling so that we know how we want to think about this. And then it becomes a pattern that we can maybe use broadly across the industry. So I think that's one place. There are other standards, though, I think that are pretty well adopted. And so if we think about things like cataloging our data through the DCAT catalog standard, we use that. thinking about, everybody coming up with a identifier policy that allows us to reuse identifiers, and especially using it for public vocabularies, we do that. So there's a couple of places like that where I think we already have pretty good agreement. And I think some of the rest of this just comes from letting these projects mature, being willing to map and adopt these public standards within your own companies. And then we probably need one more really good use case where, say, one of our partner companies will generate a data set. They will follow this model, they will follow these ontologies, and we can just use it. No transformation. We know how to do it. The data is self-described. We can just use it. So I think those are the sort of things that we need to find and make a little bit of noise about.
And to add to that, I think the further you get into the space of CDISC, SEND, and SDTM, which are more industry-specific standards. So some level of standardization exists with respect to company handling this data. But yeah, the earlier parts are where we'll need to really focus on coming together.
I saw you burning to jump in the fray, Berenice. This one as well.
No, then I think that the collaboration, definitively having collaborative framework, defining standard together, defining methodology together, that will help to consolidate the field largely. Then that is something that is important, and this collaboration is with all the actors of the industry. Not only vendors or technology provider or service provider, but it should be consolidated to have a good adoption, to be consolidated across industry.
So we didn't touch on this, but fair data principles are principles. It's not a standard. So that also maybe speaks to some of the questions that I saw on the chat. Fair data is not a standard. And that makes it a little bit even more interesting. Karine, so yes. From my side, I wanted to thank all the panelists. This has been, as expected, very, very fruitful and enlightening talk. So I'm very glad that I had the opportunity to do this. And again, thanks to Karine and Berenice and Autoforce for organizing this. And I give you back the floor, Karine.
Thank you, Giovanni. First of all, thank you for moderating this fireside chat. It was indeed very enlightening. The questions you asked, the responses also from Aishwarya, Tom, and Berenice. Thank you as well for your contributions to the fireside chat. First time that we organized this, so ran really well. Very interesting insights from your end. Then I think, yeah, we're ending. We're coming to the close of the fireside chat. Let me ask everyone if you have any further questions for around FAIR, feel free to share them via the post survey that you will receive when you end this Zoom session. We'll try to get back to you then afterwards. Thank you very much for attending, and yeah, please check out our website, because we will be sharing the recording of this fireside chat in the next few days, so you'll be able to yeah, view the recording, share with your colleagues if you want to do that. Thank you very much all for joining and participating in the fireside chat. Thank you.
Thank you.